Welcome to Happy to See Me, the podcast that puts the spotlight on the overlooked and underestimated. I'm Erica Kasupanen, the first Canadian to win Survivor. But before that, I was a Filipino immigrant and corporate perfectionist who felt doubted and overlooked. Now I'm here to prove that every journey, whether messy, beautiful, or unexpected, is worth celebrating. Every Monday, I bring you candid conversations and relatable pep talks with guests who've defied expectations. If you're ready to feel seen, celebrated, and empowered, you're in the right place. And here, I'm always happy to see you. Someone recently showed me a photo of me from university, and I looked at it and I thought, okay, I know this is me, but this doesn't really look like me or even feel like me. For one, she had natural colored hair, and she didn't want to smile with her teeth because she felt so insecure about her teeth and probably so insecure about so many things. But the more that I looked at this photo, I started to feel grateful for that young Erica. Because that young me who was still figuring things out and building her confidence, she still took the next step and she still took risks and she persevered and she created all of these new chapters that built the life that I have today, where I'm continuing to write new chapters for myself. And as I look back at that old chapter of me and all of the chapters that have happened since then, I developed so much confidence and I learned lessons that helped me in the next chapter. And I couldn't have done that without the young, insecure, university version of me who I was staring at in this photo, who decided, hey, I don't know what the future looks like, but I'm going to take another step forward. And those old chapters that led to the chapter that came after them, and the current chapter, and the chapters that are coming next, and all of the lessons that you learned in each one. That's what I'm talking about in this week's episode with Marci Ien. Few Canadian public figures demonstrate resiliency and adaptability in the way that Marci Ien has. And today we're talking about all of her chapters, from journalism school to being one of the most recognized journalists in Canada to politics, and all of the perseverance she needed to get to where she is today. But first, I love to start each episode by talking about something I was happy to see this week. And I know I normally share, milestones or shiny career achievements. But this week, do you know what I was happy to see? That I got to declutter. So like many people, I've had these bags sitting in my condo filled with stuff that I wanted to get rid of. And I actually had these bags in this office where I record this podcast for months. So literally for months, I've had bags of random stuff behind me as I'm talking to the guests, as I'm talking to you listeners. To get to this desk, I would have to climb over these bags every week, and they would be piling up and getting bigger for months. And it just became one of those things on the to-do list, but always the lowest priority thing. And I let these things pile up until earlier this week, one of my friends said, hey, I need to declutter. Do you have anything you want to get rid of? Do you want to make a day of it? I was like, yes. So we went out of town. We donated all these items. We went thrifting. We had lunch. We made a day of it. And then I came home, and for the first time in months, I saw the floor of my office. And it was such a small thing that felt so daunting, but doing that gave me so much relief. And it reminded me how important it is to make small changes that can really re-energize your space. So what I'm happy to see this week, 1, a little bit of ease, 2, a bit more space physically and mentally, and 3, the reminder that making a little change can really switch up the energy. But my guest, she knows a lot about big changes. Marci Ien has served as a member of parliament since October 2020, and she was most recently the Minister of Women and Gender Equality and Youth. Marci was a journalist for 30 years as one of the most recognizable media personalities in Canada, co-hosting The Social and Canada AM. And after that iconic career, she entered politics in 2020. And I really wanted to note that we actually recorded this interview a few weeks ago. After the interview, I was really reflecting on everything we talked about, and I felt really energized about all of the insights that Marci shared and how I felt so excited to share them with everybody who's listening. And then I went on social media and I saw that Marci had announced that she was not running for re-election and her chapter in politics was coming to a close. I freaked out a little bit because I thought, oh no, I thought I was interviewing this federal minister. Are people still going to find value in all of these incredible insights she's sharing because she's leaving politics? But I listened to the interview again, and it feels even more meaningful Because in this interview, we talk about the different chapters in Marci's life, the lessons she learned in each one, and how each chapter changed her for the better. And now we have the honor of seeing Marci wrap up this chapter in politics and embark on her new chapter, whatever that may be. And I hope everyone listening to this episode who is going through change right now, change that is a surprise or change that you choose for yourself. I hope that as you listen to this, you build more trust in knowing that you will have the strength to persevere through whatever chapter comes next. So if you know somebody who's ready to start a new life chapter or who's ready to close the current chapter, make sure you share this episode with them so they can learn from Marci's journey. So why don't we just get into it? Here is my interview with Marci Ien. I hope you enjoy it.
I heard that you were on the social set a couple of times.
I was. So I actually was on the social set a few times and on Canada AM a few times.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that. Was I there at the time?
Yes. I was thinking, because I'm like, I know we've met briefly, but it was always super quick because I worked in public relations. I would go in with the guests.
With guests.
Yes, exactly. I would go with the guests to make sure everything was okay. And the hosts were always so sweet. So you and the other hosts would come up, shake our hands. And I think they are so nice for how early they probably need to wake up every day.
Yeah,
and
it was way too early.
I'm like, when was the last time I went to Canada AM? Probably 10 years ago.
The show ended in 2016.
Wow. If I was to go back and tell me, the PR person, that I would now have my own show and I'd be interviewing Marci Ien, I don't think she would have believed it. Do you think that the version of you from 2015 at Canada AM would believe where you are right now?
Absolutely not. Because that version of me didn't even have this scenario as part of a plan. This wasn't even a vision. So absolutely, I never would have written this script.
When you were younger, did you feel like you had a vision for what life was going to be for you? Did you have a vision about what journalism was going to look like for you? Or were you always open to how things would change?
As a kid, I actually was an actor.
Wow.
And so the vision was a little bit, and I'll use the acting lightly, but the vision was a little bit different. I did a show for most of my childhood. I did it for about 10 years. So I didn't even see journalism at that point. I liked the idea of acting, performance, that kind of thing, but I didn't envision journalism. I thought I might act at one point. A lot of my life was very unscripted. A lot of it is not falling into places, but getting opportunities and thinking, oh, that seems like a challenge. Oh, news writer, I can do that. I like to write. Let's see. And then liking it. And then that leading to reporting and everything else. But it's been an interesting life because it's always been about taking on new challenges, whether I was scared or not, plunging, whether I was scared or not, and learning, always wanting to learn something new.
What I love about following your journey, because yes, I've seen you on Canada AM in person and on screen. I feel like over the years, we've gotten to see many chapters of you and your journey, and I want to get into all of them. But first, on this podcast, we put the spotlight on people or experiences that are normally overlooked or underestimated. So I want to know, have you ever felt underestimated? And if you have, can you share a moment when you did?
Oh, absolutely. So I had just graduated TMU. It was called Ryerson at the time, but TMU now. And I wanted to be a reporter. And I went into an interview as a young reporter. I had my tape with me and everything else. And the person speaking to me didn't comment on the tape or the reel that I'd put together, but commented on how he thought I just maybe didn't have what it took in this business. I'm not sure what it took meant, but just didn't quite have what it took. There's just something, And so this person who had been in the industry for decades, it was one of those moments. Do you believe them? Do you take them at face value because they should know, shouldn't they? Or do you reject that and try to somehow continue anyway? And that was really the day that I learned the power of no. Someone says no. What do you do with it? What do? Do you retreat or do you hone in and go for it? And I kept on going. And interestingly enough, that happened at the local station, so Channel 9. And I ended up working in the same place, but nationally with Canada AM.
Wow.
And with Newsnet. So it was just a very interesting road But yes, someone said to me very early in my career, you might want to think about something else.
Wow. Based on probably nothing of substance.
I don't even know. Maybe I gave them a feeling. I don't.
I had read a previous interview you've done where you've said that when you were in journalism school, there weren't a lot of Black students in your class. There wasn't a lot of Black representation on TV. So when you're having all these signals that there's not someone like you who's done it before, and when you're having people literally tell you you don't have what it takes based on nothing, how do you keep going even though that blueprint for your success might not exist?
Because it wasn't just me. There were very few of us, but there was someone that was very important and very pivotal at that time, Dwight Drummond, who is now an anchor on CBC. We entered that program same time, same year, shared a locker. There were lockers at the time, and we held each other up. And frankly, I don't know what I would have done if not for him, because I knew I wasn't alone. I knew we had similar goals. And so we just kept going. We just kept our heads up. We did all that we could. We worked really, really hard, and we accomplished what we needed to accomplish. I often think of that time, Erica. It's such a good question, because I think, what if there aren't certain people in your life for a moment such as this? But I'll tell you, even if it's just one makes a difference. And that's not to say that there weren't other Black people or people of color or people that came from Scarborough, where I did, going to the school. It's just that in our particular program, that wasn't the case. There were a couple of us, and Dwight and I became fast friends and good friends, and we held each other up. We still do.
So you're still both in touch. You still support each other.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's family.
I love that. I do a lot of speaking for students who are in university or about to graduate high school, and people ask me, what's something that I should be doing right now? And I'm like, you know what? I know that when you're about to graduate, you're really focused on impressing people who seem more senior than you, or impressing the hiring managers, which makes sense based on where they are in life. But what I've learned, and I feel like this is probably similar for you, pay more attention to building the relationships with your peers, because those are going to be the people who actually open the doors for you and support you and catch you when you fall throughout your career. And those relationships last so long.
That is true. It's so important to recognize those relationships, not bypass those relationships, nurture those relationships. And at the same time, this generation, young people, they do it differently. They don't want to wait. They have ideas. And I also, I encourage people to go for it. We're in a society now where you don't always have to wait your turn. Work is different. Look at the space that we're in. You've got a podcast. Look at the digital space. That, by and far, is a young person's space. To take it as they will, it gives them permission to chart their own course. And that we're at a different time now with regards to work, I think, than we've ever been.
I totally agree. I think that now so much is changing. So many things that I thought were stable even years ago are totally shifted. And you just have to be ready to go with the change, right?
Absolutely. I'm a child of immigrant parents who were all about get the good job, keep your head down, make sure you get a pension, do all the things. And it's a different world now. Coming up now, you might have 5, 10 jobs in your career, not one. And none of them might provide pension. You could be freelance. You could be, right? Be your own boss. We have very much an entrepreneurial spirit that's growing across this country, especially with women. So it's a different deal. It's just about embracing this difference.
It's so funny because I also grew up in an immigrant family, and my parents always wanted stability. They worked so hard to make sure we could provide for ourselves.
That's right.
I get the job. I'm like, okay, I have the stable career, and I decide, wait, don't want to do that anymore. And I had to go through that mindset shift. When you were in journalism and you were on Canada AM was one of the longest running shows in Canada.
In North America.
Yeah. So that to me sounds like a stable gig, right? But of course, in 2016, it gets canceled. How do you respond to that? What is your initial reaction to the show getting canceled?
The initial reaction was shock and very much sadness. Initially, that was the reaction. It's like, oh, this is coming to an end, and I'm not ready for this to come to an end. There's so much more to do. But that's the nature of the business. But shock and sadness, those are the two words.
Do you look back at that time now that it's almost 10 years later, and think, what do you think? Do you think that you had to be as scared as you were in that moment?
No. And what I've learned very well is that opportunity comes in different ways. And sometimes it means a door that closes. And sometimes it's a door that you don't want to close or don't think should close. But I will tell you, Erica, as soon as that door closed, growth and change began. Tons of change began. And growth as a person, as a woman, as a mom, like all of it, as a sister, as an aunt, change began. And I look back and think, okay, so I see why that happened. It had to happen. There was more that I needed to do. And there was more of me, more of a voice that needed to be unleashed.
I love that you bring that up, because the next chapter, when you were on The Social, I think that was one of my favorite times watching you as a viewer, because as a viewer, it seemed like there was this big shift in you.
Yeah.
Can you describe what that was like?
There was a huge shift. Well, there was a lot going on at the time. So went to The Social, and of course that was new, and, getting to know my co-hosts and everything else, and fitting in with that program and being myself and bringing things to the table. But there was also a lot going on personally. There was a marriage that was ending, kids that were in the middle of it all, me doing this show and trying to be honest about all the things that were happening in my life and wanting to share. It's such a shift. As a journalist, the story is never about you, right? As a journalist, you have the privilege of listening and sharing the stories of others, bringing light to those stories, and hopefully changing things because these stories are brought to light. That's not the case with a show like The Social. A show like The Social is opinion. It's life journey experience and sharing what you've learned and sharing stories about self. And I wasn't used to that. So once I got used to it, I think it took a little bit, but once I got used to it, it was like, oh boy, now I'm an oversharer, because I turned into, the girls would always go, okay, that might be oversharing. Then it became, oh boy, what might she say today?
I loved it, though. I loved watching it. Can I share one of my favorite memories of watching on The Social?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to double check. You have a foot tattoo, right?
I do.
Okay, I remember there was one episode where you're all talking about tattoos and whether or not tattoos are allowed in the workplace. And then you just pull up your pant leg and you have these sandals on. You're like, I have a tattoo and I've been a journalist for 30 years. Does this tattoo make me less of a journalist? And I remember thinking, that is badass. That is not something I would have seen Marci Ien do on Canada AM. So it resonates. It sticks with people.
Listen, I remember, doing that and then thinking, and should I pull up my blouse and show the one on my back as well? Should I do that too? But yeah, that's exactly right. And the thing is, I remember having that tattoo and literally being the news anchor of Canada AM in the summertime wearing sandals, and thinking, I am who I am. I'm still asking the questions. I'm still bringing the news that, Canadians need to them. It doesn't make me any less of one, but we have this construct of what a journalist should look like. And I'm probably none of that, to be honest. I looked different. I acted differently. A Black woman doing this. I just think that I didn't fit the classic mold, and I'm glad I didn't.
And I think that's why so many viewers, and even now, so many members of the public resonate with you. When you made this switch from reporting on the news to being able to share your own stories, is there a story that you told that maybe you were nervous to tell it, but after you told that story, you realized, okay, it is safe for me to share my personal experiences?
Well, there are two. I will go back to separation. I hadn't said anything and was going through these very tough times at home. And I just didn't feel I was being honest because we were covering different stories. And my perspective was meant to be that of a married woman with 2 kids, except that was really no longer the case. And so I decided one day to share the fact that we had separated. And it was hard. It was really hard to do. It was very personal. But I really came to the point that I couldn't be honest with the stories that I was telling or honest to the opinions that I was meant to put forward for different stories we were talking about if I didn't come correct and say, this is who I am. If you aren't comfortable with who you are, then that's an issue, right? I felt like it was almost a facade because I wasn't telling people where I was coming from. And I also thought, maybe there's others that I can help because I'm going through this. I'm not the only one going through this. Maybe it's being real about this situation and maybe that helps too. Maybe there's someone out there that hears my story and is comforted by it. But that was very hard to share, Erica. But I did. It was just putting all my business out there, my most personal business. And I think the second one, and I got Blaze's permission to share it, was the mental health struggles that she was going through, my daughter. And talking about that, of course, getting her permission, but Blaze said, maybe it'll help another kid. Maybe it'll help someone if you share what we go through and what I'm going through as a family. So those were two big ones. Oh boy. And there's another. Man, there was a lot, Erica, but I lost a child. I miscarried just before my son dashed, and that was hard. And I shared that, and I shared the loneliness of that. And, the club, it's the club that no one wants to belong to. Not a lot of people speak about it and talk about it. And it just kind of happens. And then, you're away from work, and all of a sudden you come back to work and nobody's really sharing anything. And yet you're going through this trauma. And so I wanted to talk about it again, and did so with Dr. Sheila Vijayasinghe, who is still an amazing contributor on the social, because she had been through the same thing.
I love that you were able to share those experiences. I've had so many friends who have either gone through separations or had failed pregnancies. And then something that I hear that's so common is people would say, I'm so angry that nobody talks about how common this happens, how frequent this is.
Yeah, nobody talks about it because there's almost a shame that's attached to it, right? If it's a marriage that's ending, well, then now you have a broken home. But one of my good friends said it was broken before, it's fixed now. And I said, that's true. I don't know why we call it broken homes after that. It's very much fixed, and my children are way better because we're not together. So there's that, but there's still this shame, right? That you aren't this perfect thing. And then with a miscarriage, it's just, there's guilt and there's shame. Did I do something wrong? Should I have worked less? Is there something that I was eating that I shouldn't have been eating? Was I getting enough sleep? All of these things that weigh heavily on this huge loss that frankly doesn't ever go away. And yet we don't talk about it.
You brought up the idea of being the perfect person. Did you ever think that you were going to be the perfect journalist or the perfect news personality? Or did you always know, I'm doing it Marci's way?
Oh, absolutely. There is no such thing. And the one thing that I will say is that I worked really hard to research anybody that I talked to, really hard to maybe ask questions that other people weren't answering or weren't asking, rather, to get something new out of the interviewee. But I knew I am far from perfect. I was just trying to be respectful. I was trying to do my job well, but be kind doing it, not trample on anybody, but really just provide a place where people felt comfortable talking to me, but also comfortable sharing. I think I was able to do that, but far from perfect. Oh no, never thought that. In fact, it was the opposite. There were points where I thought, do I deserve to be here? Is this really, is this for me? Am I doing a good enough job? There was a lot of that and second guessing of self, but never thinking I was perfect because, oh my gosh, far from.
I feel like I gave up on the idea of being perfect or ideal or anything a long time ago.
And what does perfect mean? What does that mean? What is it? What is perfect? Because that's another thing, right? To whose standard? What kind of standard are we trying to meet here? Right?
Exactly.
And who put those standards in place?
I feel like when people are perfectionist or when they pursue perfection, it's almost like they create this rubric based on what they think other people want.
That's exactly right.
But then you're never going to figure it out. And you're also never going to reach it because you're never going to make everybody happy.
That's and that is such a lesson that you aren't going to make everybody happy. And that's just something that we're not going to attain ever. And we shouldn't even be trying to do that.
With you living so much of your career in the public eye, both as a newscaster and then now in politics, you're probably subject to a lot of criticism. How do you create those boundaries for yourself?
That would be very true. Social media is something, isn't it? People give it to you in real time. And while there are people that are very kind and sometimes even grateful for the work, whether it's within this ministry of women and gender equality and youth or work that I did as a broadcaster, there are always those that say, I remember when I started on the social and a woman said, yeah, liked it a lot better when you were reading a teleprompter.
Wow.
Don't know about all these opinions. She felt that I talked about race a lot. She thought that I talked about my experiences as being Black and that it was divisive and all of these things. And she liked it better when I had a script in front of me and I was reading the news and that was about it. But then I kind of knew I was doing something right. So I try to take it with a grain of salt, but it is hard because there might be 10 amazing things that people might say and one really bad one. And as human beings, we hone in on the one really bad one, right? It's how we're wired. So it's less social media. It's less, looking places like X in particular and just stepping away. I don't entertain a lot of it anymore because it's so toxic. When it comes to people, I welcome disagreement. Not everybody has to agree. It's just, can we talk about it? So sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's worse than that. I can take it. It becomes an issue when things move on over to my family, my kids, and people have things to say about that's when that's off base. And that's when I take action. But it comes with the territory. And I think too, Erica, in fact, I know when I got into politics, it was the thing that my family and friends were most worried about because I had taken a lot of online abuse at the social, a lot. And they said, well, look at what's happened to you here. What the heck is going to happen now if you're a politician? They were really worried. And I said, well, the social prepared me for this. It absolutely did. Because I don't know how much worse it could get, but it prepared me for this.
Did you get more criticism when you were on the social or as a politician?
I think on the social.
Wow.
I do. But I think on the social because it's opinionated, right? Because it was opinions. And there was a time there, a couple of years there where it was fast and furious.
Wow. I can relate, having been on 2 reality shows, and one of them, I found that
making history, by the way.
Thank you.
You're amazing.
It's funny. I found that people were angry when I won and then angry when I lost. I'm like, okay, no matter what I do, somebody's going to be angry. And when you go through that type of public criticism, I don't think anyone can prepare you for it, even though we know that it's something that will happen if you're a public figure. Nothing can prepare you for it. And you have to kind of let yourself feel how you feel. But then I find after going through that, it's almost like there's a new layer that has been built on me. And I'm like, okay, there's just one other thing that can't hurt me anymore. Because I realize that actually, all that noise actually has nothing to do with me.
Absolutely. And then you think about the people that actually love you, right? And the people that are in your corner, family and friends. And that's why it's so important to have a village, a small one. It's important to have people that have your back no matter what, because they remind you of what really matters. And it's not all the noise, and it's not the people that would tear you down. It's about the people that build you up.
100%. And also, aside from all of the criticism that you got from being on the social.
That's online. Online, there was criticism. And it's not all of it. It's just that I'd never seen anything like that before. But clearly it's because I was saying different things.
Yes.
Right? And people had this image of me in their head, and not just in their head, but what they saw every day on AM or whatever it is. And then this was like, who is this? And what is she saying? And oh, she believes that. That's what the show was about. And I wasn't the only one. The girls, all of us took a lot of criticism.
Wow. Well, I guess it's one of those things. If you try to please everybody, you please nobody, right?
That's right.
So you just have to please yourself and know that you're showing up authentically.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Do you think that experience of being able to tell these more vulnerable stories and show up more as yourself set you up well when you pivoted into politics?
Absolutely. And isn't that something? How, one experience prepares you for the next. AM prepared me for the social. The social prepared me for politics. And politics will prepare me for whatever comes next.
I'm sure that you had a lot of people when you switched into politics who were saying, she's just a journalist. She's a talk show host. What does she know about politics? Is that something you experience? And then how do you reconcile all of the naysayers?
Well, I say to them that it's called the House of Commons, heavy on the commons, right? And that's who MPs are. MPs are regular people that come from communities and bring their life experiences to a place called the House of Commons. So that's how I see politics and politicians. And I think the best politicians recognize that you are one of the people, you're part of community. And then you bring your community's challenges, your community's voice, opinion to this place. And there are 338 people that do that. So that's what politicians are. They're not people that are special by any means, the way I see it. It's people coming together and representing their communities. We all come from different places, but that's what the House of Commons is supposed to be.
And I think that especially for people who, again, don't fit the box or don't look like the norm that you would imagine,
Yeah.
a lot of the skills that they use to find success tend to be intangible, right? Like your ability to really research a person, show empathy, ask good questions, and create connection. That probably helped you a lot in politics, even if somebody who wasn't familiar with you before could really understand how that's impactful.
Mhm. The listening, that is such a huge gift. Just to be able to listen and hear, even someone that disagrees with you, right? Someone that maybe is from another party or from another place or whatever it is, listening, because that changes things. When we're screaming and shouting over one another, then we're in a toxic environment. When you try to listen to someone's argument and try to understand where they're coming from, that can change things. Right now, I have critics in the House of Commons. So there's a critic that is from the NDP and the Bloc and a conservative critic. And the experience that I've had is that we've been able to work together and get some pretty good things done, amazing things done, because we understand that we are working for people and want to make things better, in particular for women and gender diverse people in this country and youth. So it's better to work together than tear each other apart. So we've been a part of some really interesting projects and things that have gone forward and that our government has supported. And some may look at that and think, well, wait a minute, isn't she your critic? Isn't she on the other side of the floor?
Mm-hmm.
But really that listening and that whole idea of being open to coming together is so, so, so important and critical if we're going to get the work done that we're supposed to get done.
Isn't it funny how your experience with critics shifts? Because before it was these faceless trolls on the internet, and now it's these people who you work with.
I never made that connection, Erica, but you're so right. And that's such a I never thought of it that way, right? Wow. Okay. That is something. Never thought of it that way, but that is true with the so-called, and they have that title of critic. We're getting things done.
Yeah. I feel with your critics now in politics, you all want the same outcomes, right? You want better lives for women, gender diverse people, for the youth. Just the way you want to do it or the path to get there, you probably have different views on it. But at least it sounds like your critics have shared goals. So that must be a bit of a relief compared to before.
It is. It's a huge, and it's just the way I envision the job. I never envisioned the job having to be adversarial and all those things, which is what it needs to be sometimes, because some people just say things that are dead wrong and it's like, got to stand up and you got to fight, right? But I really envisioned getting some important things done, and we've been able to do that.
I love to hear that you're working together across parties, because truthfully, right now, it sounds like politics is something that stresses out a lot of people.
Yeah,
I think
for good
especially
reason.
when Canadians are paying attention to US politics, it's stressful, it's scary. I know that for me, I get overwhelmed when I follow the news. I know that right now, DEI especially is being attacked in politics. Where do you think this is coming from?
I think when times are tough, when times are hard, people get othered, that it's easy to blame others. If I don't have a job, who's taking those jobs? And are they qualified? If I don't have a home, why don't I? Is it because there's too many people here coming from different places? And history shows us this, right? In bad times, people get othered. And it's a way to other people. It's a way to say, we are just going to, in some people's eyes, level the playing field. No one's special here. Except that's not the case, because the playing field is not level and systems have been built to make sure they're not level. And I often say to people, when it comes to DEI, please understand what this means. DEI means that people who are never part of the conversation or part of the room that's making decisions on employment or whatever it is, actually are just part of the conversation. Doesn't always mean they're getting the job. It also means that we are in Ramadan right now. If people are able to break fast and have a room as part of their company or their school where they can go and pray and do that, that's DEI. If a new mom who's just returned to work and needs to use a breast pump, right? And pump or whatever's and has a room to do that that's designated for that. Or even, I go through airports a lot and I'm seeing pods in airports where moms can feed their baby, that's DEI. If there are ramps that allow people to access a building because they're in a wheelchair, that's DEI. So when we use this catch-all as DEI, and really it's about Black, Indigenous, racialized people, and say, well, it's, the DEI policies, we need to understand exactly what the umbrella of DEI is. But back to your initial question, it's about othering, because that's what people do. When they're not doing so well, it's who's to blame because I'm not doing so well.
Like, I can empathize because I'm sure that it can be a confusing time for people who might feel like DEI is to blame for some of their problems. But I think it's not about somebody coming in and taking away your seat at the table, but
That's
it's
unqualified.
about adding more chairs to the table.
It's adding more chairs, and this assumption that people aren't qualified. Where does that come from, right? That somebody literally off the street without qualifications is taking a job because they're a certain color. That's not what this is. It's providing opportunities for those that have been disproportionately impacted and not had those opportunities.
Yes, we want more people who are qualified to have the opportunity.
That's exactly right.
To be there.
That's exactly right.
I know that's something else that's really scary when looking at politics, especially when we look at American politics, are a lot of people who are gender non-conforming see this as a really uncertain and scary time. And with you as the Minister of Gender Equity, what is your message for anyone who feels like they're afraid right now?
It's a message that we as a government and Canada has always stood on. I remember a couple of summers ago, I was in Ottawa for Pride, and the Prime Minister and I unveiled our country's first 2S LGBTQI plus action plan. And the word action is in there for a reason, because that $100 million has gone to community. 75% of it goes to grassroots community orgs. So if there is a young person that's been kicked out of their house because they've come out, there are organizations that can help, and money goes there. Money goes to trans kids, families that are navigating different aspects of who they are. So many amazing organizations doing good things who got money from government for the first time. And it was, I'm very proud of the plan, but also traveling this country and speaking to people who have benefited because of it. I know it's worked, and I know it's working. It's something to be seen, right? When you name something like that and it's a government initiative, it means we see you. We see you. We not just see you, we're acting on your behalf. And so in this country, I would take hold and look at that and know that we are people that have always stood, and well, I won't say always because there's some stuff in our history, but have stood, at least I should say this government, for the rights of queer people. And that's not changing anytime soon. I would say, though, it is scary because that is not the case with everyone, right? And when the president was elected for the second time, I noted that even before these terrible tariffs, he noted that there were two genders, right? And the leader of the Conservative Party agreed. And then he started talking about DEI. So even before the tariffs, he spoke about those things and was using executive orders, right? So it is something we have to be vigilant about. But again, that comes back to empathy, right? And it comes back to the othering thing that I was talking about, that people blame other people. And usually they're people that have had to go through so much that get the blame, that get the ill treatment. So I would say we've got to stay vigilant, but know that we see you. We see you, and we're helping in any way that we can.
That's such a helpful message to hear. You have talked to so many people, I'm sure, over your political career now, whether they're constituents, people from the opposition parties. You're probably opening yourself up to so many different points of view. Was there anything that you learned during your time in politics so far that really opened your eyes to a life experience that you didn't know about?
I remember talking to a veteran politician. She had been doing this for decades, and it was a particularly rough question period where it literally, I don't know how else to describe it, but toxic, just screaming match. And I guess you could see my face walking out of there because I was a little, not shaken, but thinking like, this is just not the way it should be. And thinking about young people, watching as well, thinking this is the example that we're showing. It's just bad. And she said to me, Marci, it never used to be like this. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, question period was one thing, but there was a time where we'd all go out for dinner, or you would sit down and spend time with the person on the other side, kind of what I try to do now. And that's another part of why I try to do it now, because she'd share with me, there'd been another way, not too long ago. It wasn't always this contentious. And so that was a huge lesson. People are people. Humanity is humanity. And there is something to be said for a crowd culture where there's a leader and everybody follows him or her. And so if they're acting badly, everybody acts badly. But innately, that's not who they are. And that was a lesson. That was a lesson to, it's like, okay, so who are you really? If I ask you out for dinner and I understand your life story and where you come from, am I going to see you differently? And overwhelmingly, the answer is yes. But it's just taking that opportunity and knowing that we don't have to be enemies to do this job.
Yeah, I feel like in a world where everything feels so divisive, I want to believe that at the core, we are all good people who want to have good lives for ourselves and for our families and to feel safe and secure, and that we're all going about it in different ways. But I really want to believe that at the core, we're all good people.
Yeah, I think so. And if we're not, then what happened? And understanding that too. What went wrong, right? What happened? When was the pivotal moment where this changed, right? And the way you feel about things changed, and how you feel about others. Where did that change? And understanding that too.
It's true. Yeah. We all have our things that affect
We all have our things.
The course that we go on.
Erica, we all have our things.
When you first became the cabinet minister for women, gender equality, and youth, did you have a vision for what you wanted life to be like for these groups in Canada?
Absolutely. For women, I wanted to talk about joy as well. That was really cognizant. So whether, it's women entrepreneurs or whether it's women mentoring young women, my portfolio has a lot to do with gender-based violence. We have a $500 million plan around that. It is amazing and it's helping so many people. But I wanted to make sure that we injected that with joy and with positive stories too. And that it wasn't just the negatives and the hardships. So important, obviously, but I wanted to make sure that we were well-rounded that way. Gender equality and of course all genders. It was just to show that everybody is equal, right? And it doesn't matter who they are and what their pronouns are. We are equal and all deserve the same rights and respect. And so I saw that as bringing people's stories to the fore. I really felt that if people understood that we all bleed red, and highlighting different people, that others that may not have been inclined to be in rooms with queer people or not believe in rights for queer people might see them differently. They say that when you're in a tough situation with somebody threatens you, that the first thing you're supposed to do is get to a humanity level, meaning you share with them something that they can connect to. So if somebody is holding me hostage, I remind them that I'm a mother and I want to get back to my kids. Are you a mom? Are you a dad? I have kids too. I want to get back to them. And it's the same thing. It's telling stories, telling your story and sharing. So from the gender perspective, the gender equality perspective, I wanted to make sure menstrual equity, so proud that we did some work there, just providing, free menstrual products, helping to do that across the country has been huge. And I hear that from a youth perspective, making sure that young people understand that they have a voice. I'm the vice chair of the Prime Minister's Youth Council. He is the chair. And these young people represent provinces and territories right across the country. And they bring their stories, the stories of their communities. They have the privilege to speak to anybody they need to. If they need to speak to a prime minister, they need to speak to a minister, an MP. They have the power to do that. And so I wanted young people to know and want them to know that their voice not only matters, it is the voice that we need to engineer us into this future and navigate the what's now as well. So just empowering young people more, knowing that politics matter. Because, sometimes the young people think it doesn't matter. These politicians don't care about me, and wanting to show that, no, that's not the case. We do. And we need your voice and we need your guide. frankly.
Just seeing you and hearing you talk about this, it's so clear that this portfolio was so meaningful to you.
It really is. I thought, wow, did they come up with this just for me? Like it couldn't have been. I remember there was a time when I was getting a lot of, requests to host things, do different things. And so I said, listen, I can't do everything. And what I did was I literally put it all in a box. And if it fell into the box of women and kids, I'm there. And look at my portfolio. So a lot of the things that I was doing outside of the social and even Canada AM had to do with organizations that help women or youth.
It sounds like the perfect lesson in knowing what's valuable to you and sticking with it, and knowing that how you're going to deliver on these values and live these values might look a different way than you had planned. But if you stick to what's important to you, you're going to be able to affect the things that are important to you.
That's exactly it. And hindsight is something. When we started this interview, you said, did you see this? Could you picture this for yourself? No. But I am so humbled to see how this has come together and the way it has. Because each experience has taught me so much and has enabled me to take on the next one in a confident way. So when I look at it, I think, okay, so that makes sense. I did this because it was leading up to this, or I met this person or saw this or took this note because it led to whatever it was. Everything it makes sense.
To me, it's so nice to hear, right? Because, I started my career in public relations because I didn't know what I was going to do after school. But I was like, okay, I just need a job. And then I just ended up on the train, stayed on it. There were elements that I enjoyed, which were telling stories. And then I allowed myself to switch things up. And I realized, okay, I'm still doing the thing that I always wanted to do. Now I'm just doing it in a different way. So now that you're in this chapter that is focused on politics, is there a way that you personally want to grow in this chapter? What do you, Marci, want to get out of this chapter?
That is such a good question. I want to make sure that there is definitive change, that when I look back on this chapter, that we accomplished some things that made things better for women in this country, gender diverse people in this country, young people in this country. I just want to know that I made a difference. That's it. Whether it's one person, two people, whatever it is, I just want to know that the space that I was in was better because I was in it.
Before we wrap up, can you share some advice for anyone who might be at the start of a new life chapter?
Oh my gosh. Jump in and do so with courage, because it takes courage. Know that it's going to be more than okay. And know that every experience happens for a reason. So if a door has closed, this window that is opened, this new opportunity, even though you might be questioning, am I qualified? Is this right for me? Jump in, because there's learning to be had. And I know that growth does not happen unless there's discomfort. Got to be a little uncomfortable for growth to happen. When we're too comfortable, it means we probably need to be experiencing something else.
I love that. And I've loved watching all of your chapters so far, and I can't wait to keep following along. If the listeners want to follow along with your journey, where can they do that?
Well, on Instagram, it's Marci.Ien on Instagram. Also, we have a government website, so WAGE, so Women and Gender Equality. See what's happening there. LinkedIn. We're on every bit of social media, but you'll find out what's happening there. I post a lot.
Thank you so much, Minister Ien, for being on the podcast today.
It was amazing to be with you. And thank you for your thoughtful questions, Erica. Really appreciate them.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Yeah, it was great.
And I guess we'll talk in another 10 years.
And now she's on to this chapter.
Thank you, Marci, for being so generous with your time and with your story during what I didn't realize was going to be one of your last weeks in office. And thank you so much for all of your service for Canadians. And I wish you the best of luck in your new chapter. So if you are listening and you know somebody who is starting or ending a chapter, make sure you share this episode with them. As always, the podcast is on Instagram, YouTube, and on TikTok. It's at Happy to See Me Pod. And if you haven't already, I would love if you could subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It really helps people to discover the show. Thank you so much for spending a bit of time with me this week, and I will be happy to see you next Monday.
This podcast has been brought to you by the Sonar Network.